Alright, hey, hello everyone. Today, we are happy to announce that the Dungeons & Dragons 2024 Monster Manual is finally here. That's not the year? Oh, what was that? A question? Nothing. You said 2024, but now it's 2025. 500 all-new monsters, the biggest Monster Manual ever. So does that count all the variants, like the 6 new kinds of cultists, as all new dragons? All new and redesigned. Dragons can even cast spells now. Okay, that is really cool. Dragons being able to cast spells like they could for the first half of D&D's history before it was taken away. Way easier to find all the monsters you need because they're sorted into multiple indexes. Yeah, great, but I can't seem to find the orc in here. Hierophant? No. Hierophant. The cultist Hierophant is one of our 500 all-new monsters. The quick pros. Good to high-quality paper and binding. Yes, over 500 monsters. Poisonous snake changed to venomous snake. Nature nerds rejoice. Dragons are in fact cooler now in both aesthetics and in magic. Many fun variants of familiar creatures, including lower and higher challenge ratings. We'll talk more about this later. New indexes to sort the monsters. Bigger font size. Alphabetical organization rather than groups makes most monsters easier to find. Tons and tons of artwork, both happy fun time superhero stuff and grim or even horrific in tone. Little tables for fun flavor. I freaking love that. Gonna talk more about that too. No more typical alignment. Thank you. Everything on a stat block is typical. Pretty solid introduction explaining the parts of a monster stat block for noobs, and references to treasure for many of the monsters, but that's mostly foreshadowing one of my cons. And the big pro for me, I didn't have to pay for this. Yeah, I was surprised to be offered this review copy after I had denied one for the new Dungeon Master's Guide, but I'm glad because Grace World Destroyer loves monster lore, and one of my players wants to GM for the first time running D&D 2024, so I'm gonna give him the second copy. And as always, they didn't pay me actual money, nor am I under any obligation to talk about this book at all. So, next we'll get into the cons right after our actual sponsor.
Aw, dang it. My next D&D session is in like 55 seconds, and my cat just ate all my campaign notes.
Fortunately, this everyday dilemma is completely avoidable with the digital tools at worldanvil.com. The ultimate tool set for dungeon masters, world builders, and storytellers of all kinds. World Anvil helps you keep track of everything. Setting lore, NPCs, maps, and even your campaign notes all in one convenient and organized place where hungry cats can't eat it. And if you're the kind of GM who builds deep, intricately connected worlds, or would love to if it were easier, World Anvil's campaign templates, interactive maps, and more tools make it easy to connect your ideas like never before. So whether you're running an RPG campaign, playing in one, or you just want an easier way to organize your fantastical fiction, head to worldanvil.com and use code BOB for 51% off any yearly subscription. Alright, new monster manual cons. The treasure for each monster was disappointing. I'll show you why later. The otherwise pretty solid intro is severely lacking on how to actually run a fun combat encounter. Also, gotta focus on that one later. It also repeats the notion that all 3 books are required to play, and low-key, you do need both other books to use this one effectively, so we'll get to that too. Werewolves no longer have a problem with silver. Why? Why take this from me? The otherwise awesome new indexes don't have page numbers, so you still need to flip around to find what you need. The alphabetical organization means we have no more subsections and therefore lose a lot of lore about D&D dragons, giants, and other groups, angering Grace World Destroyer. And I can't believe they kept all the giant beasts in alphabetical order by G. Why? And another disclaimer, perhaps unique to me, I don't want 500 plus monsters because I like homebrewing and because I believe homebrew is crucial to fantasy. Get this, just speaking of organization, if an RPG only provides like 50 monsters or any small amount that a GM could I don't know, conceivably use on a regular basis, then all GMs would quickly develop a working memory of those select stat blocks. Moreover, we wouldn't need multiple indexes just to dig through the book and find what we need, and there would be room for guidance and tools to homebrew your own monsters so that those baseline stat blocks never get old for your players. Homebrewing monsters is the best way to ensure monsters stay monstrous and mysterious and exciting and maintain that essence of fantasy. Instead, we get zero guidance or tools for making our own. Boo. Okay, major shout out to Ginny D for making a spreadsheet cataloging every monster from the 2014 and 2024 books. She determined there are 87 new monsters, 46 renamed, and 11 removed, taking us from 427 to 503 total monster stat blocks in the new book. Also confirming that almost all of these new monster stat blocks are in fact variants of existing ones or converted from previous editions of D&D. But to be fair, those resurrected monsters are essentially brand new to most people playing 5e today. Like, I had to double check, but yeah, the larvae new to 5e was right there in my 1e monster manual all along. And random fun fact that I didn't realize until working on this video, first edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons also had a giant Portuguese man-o-war. As in, Portugal has been D&D canon this entire time. Generally speaking, I like these additional monster variants. Yeah, I personally would rather have all their cool variant features in a table somewhere to drag and drop for homebrew, and something like that might exist in the DMG, but this presentation works all right for me, and obviously much better for beginner GMs and the many, many GMs who just prefer a huge amount of pre-built stat blocks. For example, and I know I already saw this mentioned in a couple videos myself, but one of my favorite examples of these variants are the cultists. We got the standard cultist, CR 1/8, cultist fanatic, CR 2, cultist hierophant, CR 10, and then 4 more flavored cultists, each at CR 8. The aberrant, death, elemental, and fiend with unique abilities flavored to those creature types. For such a ubiquitous enemy in fantasy games, this batch of variants is incredibly useful. My only critique here, I would have preferred the flavorful mechanics on minions, not on bosses with over 100 hit points each, because this structure means that any and every kind of cult is mostly made up of all the same generic low-level guys, and you don't see these flavorful guys until you reach the higher levels of a cult. So sure, you can do whatever you want and homebrew those unique mechanics onto the lower level guys, but in a book with 500 monsters, it feels silly that a GM has to homebrew at all. Anyway, other favorite variants o' mine include the new Tree and Gulthius Blights, because I love blights, the Titanic creature Blob of Annihilation, the Cyclops Oracle, because ever since I read about Cyclops in Dungeon Crawl Classics being trans-dimensional seers, it totally ruined normal Cyclops for me. The Violet Fungus Necro Hulk, because monsters on monsters is always fun. And I like seeing the Scout Captain because the regular Scout humanoid stat block was probably one of my most used NPC stat blocks when running 2014 D&D. And one more. Gotta love the Troll Limb. Now I don't know where else in the video to put this little change, but I find it hilarious that they replaced the D&D Quipper with a piranha. Because that's all Quippers ever were. I like imagining a meeting, somewhere in the offices of Wizard of the Coast, someone asking, hey, are there any trademarked terms that we really don't need anymore? Now at this point, Editor Bob has probably already shown you a bunch of the brilliant artwork from this book, but here's a couple more pieces. Because the art is really a top feature of this new monster manual and all of the 2024 D&D books thus far. Specifically how this one shows many monsters to scale against other creatures or in their natural habitat or using their abilities. It really brings these fantastic creatures to life, and I find that so important. This book is a key inspirational tool and gateway into the hobby of tabletop role-playing games, and the artwork is the biggest draw for so many people. It feels good that they completely nailed it. No complaints. Wait, what? Why did they show the gelatinous cube like that? Look at the description. Gelatinous cubes wobble through narrow caverns and dungeons. These oozes are naturally transparent, making them difficult to see. Yeah, they have to show them in the art, but in an open air, wide staircase, it just felt like a funny choice to me, and I wanted to point that out. However, we can also look at the cube for these amazing random tables featured on many, many monsters. Floating in the gelatinous cube is a 1. Chest or recently trapped mimic. 2. Collection of baubles or rocks resembling eyes. 3. Key to a nearby door or coffer and other fascinating debris. And you know, I might have undersold this earlier by so quickly listing it among the other pros. I think these tables might be my favorite addition to the entire book, and perhaps my favorite addition to 2024 D&D as a whole. This is exactly the kind of thing I want as a game master because it instantly makes a monster more intriguing, fantastical, or tethered to the world, and I can get all that goodness by just rolling on a table. That is really helpful stuff. Similarly, rewinding a bit, this stat block overview is great. I think way too many D&D fans of intermediate or higher experience completely take for granted that this box of numbers and terms is not very intuitive to the new game master. Actually, I know they take it for granted because when I've made other videos critiquing the structure of a stat block, I got roasted like never before by people acting like I insulted their mommy. Regardless of those opinions, D&D agrees that their stat blocks need a diagram to break it all down, and I'm glad they did. Now, someone called the RPG police because I'd like to report some borderline false advertising. Here is the text from a D&D Beyond article about this chapter of the book. The 2024 Monster Manual kicks off with a revamped How to Use a Monster chapter, which breaks down stat blocks with clear explanations, ensuring DMs of all skill levels get the most out of their monsters. Okay, that part's legit. Here's the issue. Complementing this is an all-new Running a Monster section, which provides practical advice for ensuring your monsters perform up to their challenge ratings. Whether you're a new DM learning the ropes or a seasoned storyteller looking up to freshen up on the basics, these sections will have you well equipped to unleash the full potential of every monster in your campaign. So, why don't we turn to this all-new Running a Monster section? It's a sidebar. It's this little sidebar, and all it says is that if a monster has high damage special abilities, you should use them as early and often as possible. Then default to multi-attack if it has it, and always use bonus actions, reactions, or legendary actions every round. In other words, this section of the new monster manual, this golden advice, which is supposed to have us well equipped to unleash the full potential of every monster in our campaign, no matter our skill level as a DM, that advice is to use the abilities of the monsters. Not even a line of text saying something like, if a monster's attack can hit all targets in a line or cube, always try to get at least 2 creatures. If a battle seems so easy for the characters that it's not fun for the players, introduce more monsters. What usually makes a battle exciting is time-sensitive goals or terrain with elevation, moving parts or destructible parts, or an oft-forgotten pro tip, monsters can surrender or retreat from battle. I'd go so far as to say the absence of this advice just reinforces the beginner GM's tendency to run D&D combat as merely taking turns, reducing hit points on a featureless plane until the battle stops when the monsters die. Maybe that advice is all in the DMG, and I already know some specific monsters include information on how they tend to fight. That's cool. But it would have been so simple to plug those bullet points, those vital bullet points, right here in the How to Run a Monster chapter of the Monster Book. All right, back to a good thing. I freaking love how D&D took a page right out of Shadowdark by adding this pretty little one-line description to every monster. The Gargoyle, sculpted sentinel hidden in plain sight. The Kuatoa, fish-like fanatics of the deep. Modrons, mechanized caretakers of multiversal law. Yetis, chilling stalkers of the frozen wilds. Moi, just an ultra-concise description of either what it does, where it lives, what it looks like, or what you might simply call its nature. And right below that, each creature has a special tag for its habitat, awesome, and another tag for treasure, which for me is the most disappointing part of this book. Context. I'm out of the loop. I didn't know treasure for each monster would be a thing at all. So when I saw this treasure tag, I immediately got excited. Oh wow, we got loot for every monster, amazing. And then I was immediately let down, because while flipping through these pages, you'll quickly notice that the most common treasure tags are none and any. In other words, no treasure at all, or I don't know, you make it up, GM. And alright, okay, it's not so terrible. Depending on your setting and style, it doesn't make sense for many monsters to be dropping treasure, but in those same settings and style, it's probably weird for many monsters to drop literally anything. Now personally, I love it when any monster can drop any item. To me, that adds to the mystery and weirdness and goofiness that I like in TTRPGs, so that's exactly how I designed it for my own homebrew setting, and it's led to so many funny moments and cool improv, describing how the rake dropped by a cockatrice was actually its scaly barbed bird leg. And I had to get the facts straight here, so for this new monster manual, I made my own spreadsheet, cataloging every monster, and by the way, I came out with 505. Point is, I got the treasure breakdown. 40% of the monsters, 40%, have none, nothing, no treasure. 15% have any, like whatever, loot, sure. And 45%, so less than half, got an actual tag for treasure. Either armaments, arcana, relics, implements, or individual, and that last one, individual, is defined as might keep monetary treasure. So again, maybe you decide. And because I know someone will say it, somebody probably already said it in the comments, yeah, a portion of the humanoid monster stat blocks looks like mostly the generic humanoids, and then some outliers like the Kuatoa and skeleton. Some stat blocks have a line called gear. But if you look closely, this is really just a new spot for indicating their armor, and besides armor, it just includes the names of weapons already listed on the stat block. So once again, I don't know if we were, but if we were promised new and improved treasure for every monster, this is pretty disappointing, especially when you realize you have to pull out another book, because these other 4 treasure tags for about half the monsters that have treasure refer to tables in the Dungeon Master's Guide. So, of course, that's cool and fine if you want to spend another $50 on that book, and many people probably already have. It was just frustrating for me to discover what seemed like a really cool new feature of 2024 D&D, only to realize that no, it is basically the same as it has been for the last 10 years. Not to sound dramatic, but that has pretty much been my experience with each one of the new 2024 books. Really cool art, great organization, like easier to use, but nothing new. I guess it's just weapon masteries and bastions. And speaking of the other 2024 books, early on I mentioned that this new monster manual low-key does require the DMG and PHB. So yeah, you need the first for treasure and guidance on how to actually run fun combat encounters, and you need the player's handbook for running any generic humanoids in a fun and cool way. As in, a bandit NPC could be a human, dwarf, elf, orc, any species from the PHB. You decide, and that's pretty cool. But there's no guidance whatsoever on which species traits to plug into these otherwise generic humanoid stat blocks. Believe it or not, we had a table for that in the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide, but not in any of the new books. And I must repeat, this is not a problem that I take personally, because I pretty much never run monsters as written, but for the new GM, or for the GM who doesn't love homebrewing as much as I do, or who really tries to play rules as written, God bless their soul, if they have an orc bandit attack the party, does it have 120 feet of dark vision? Can it dash as a bonus action and gain temp HP? Can it get back up if reduced to 0 hit points but not killed outright? Because those are all things that a D&D 5e 2024 orc can do, but the bandit cannot. So it's totally unclear how to run an orc bandit as written. It's not written anywhere. And if that example didn't make sense to you because you think, well duh, you just use the orc stat block, then I got news for you. You're gonna wanna check out this video on your screen and try not to read too many of the comments, because a lot of people who probably don't even play D&D 5e are really mad about this change. But thank you to my amazing patrons for directly supporting this channel. Keep building.